When the Galactic Council demanded humanity's surrender, Earth didn't fight back with weapons. They rewired the entire galaxy from within. The crystalline spires of the Galactic Council chamber reached toward infinity, each surface reflecting the light of 1,000 civilizations for 3 millennia. This sacred hall had been the center of galactic governance, where 500 species had gathered to maintain order among the stars today. However, the air crackled with unusual tension as the council prepared to address what they considered a minor administrative matter. High Counselor Zethkri, a towering figure whose translucent blue skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns, activated the central hologram with a dismissive gesture. The image that materialized showed a small, unremarkable blue-green world orbiting a yellow star in the galaxy's outer rim. A planet the locals called Earth honored representatives. Zethkri's voice resonated through the chamber's acoustic enhancement fields. We gather today to discuss the situation with the primitive species of Sol 3. These humans, as they call themselves, have been flagrantly violating Galactic Statute 847 Alpha regarding unauthorized expansion beyond their designated stellar boundaries. A ripple of disdainful chittering and clicking filled the chamber. The Vexthari delegate, resembling a mantis, crossed with a crystal formation, clacked his mandibles in amusement. Surely, High Counselor, such a backward species hardly warrants our attention. Their technology is barely adequate for interplanetary travel, let alone true space colonization. The ethereal representative from Proxima Centauri, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering force field, pulsed with condescending light patterns. The humans have established 17 colonies beyond their home system without proper authorization. While this is technically a violation, perhaps a simple warning would suffice. We hardly need waste council time on such trivial matters. High Counselor Zethkri's patterns shifted to deep crimson, a sign of growing irritation among his species. The issue is not the scale of their transgression, but the precedent it sets. If we allow one primitive species to ignore our statutes, others may follow. Order must be maintained. He paused, his voice taking on the formal tone reserved for official pronouncements. Therefore, the Council hereby issues Ultimatum Class 7 to the human government: immediate withdrawal from all unauthorized colonies and submission to galactic oversight, or face the consequences of defying the will of 500 civilizations. What none of the Council members realized was that hidden within Earth's delegation ship, parked in the station's docking bay, advanced human surveillance equipment was recording every word. The 3 human diplomats who had requested this audience, Dr. Sarah Chen, General Marcus Washington, and Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, listened with grown fury as the Council discussed their species like pest control operators debating how to handle an infestation. 3 days later, the Council reconvened to receive Earth's response to their ultimatum. The chamber buzzed with casual conversation as representatives assumed they would hear either immediate capitulation or desperate pleas for mercy. After all, what could one primitive species possibly do against the combined might of 1,000 advanced civilizations? High Counselor Zethkri activated the communication array, expecting to see the humbled faces of human leaders begging for clemency. Instead, the hologram revealed an austere conference room deep within the Pentagon, where a single figure sat calmly at a metal table. President Rebecca Martinez, a former military officer whose steel-gray eyes had witnessed both the best and worst of humanity, looked directly into the camera with an expression that would have made a shark uncomfortable. Honored members of the Galactic Council, President Martinez began, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of leadership. We have received your ultimatum, we have reviewed your demands, we have considered your threats. She paused, leaning forward slightly. Our response is simple: go to hell. The chamber erupted in shocked sounds, gasps from the mammalian species, clicks from the insectoids, harmonic chimes from the energy beings. High Counselor Zethkri's bioluminescent patterns flashed through the spectrum in rapid succession, a sign of extreme agitation. You dare defy the will of the Galactic Council, he thundered. Your entire species numbers barely 8 billion individuals across 19 worlds. We represent civilizations with populations in the trillions, technologies that could snuff out your sun, fleets that could glass every planet you've ever touched. President Martinez smiled a cold, predatory expression that sent chills through those council members whose species were capable of feeling them. You're absolutely right. Counselor, we are outnumbered, we are outgunned by every conventional measure. We should be terrified of you. Her smile widened. But you've made one critical error in your calculations, and what might that be? Primitive human. The Vexthari delegate clicked mockingly. You assumed we would fight you conventionally. The transmission ended abruptly. Leaving the council chamber in stunned silence would be the last communication they received from Earth for the next 6 months. In the months following humanity's defiant response, the Galactic Council waited for Earth to recognize the hopelessness of their situation. Surely, they reasoned, once the humans had time to contemplate the overwhelming forces arrayed against them, cooler heads would prevail. They sent increasingly stern messages to Earth. Each one met with silence. The Council's intelligence networks reported strange activities throughout. Human spaceships were moving in unusual patterns. Entire colonies were going dark for weeks at a time, and there were unconfirmed reports of massive construction projects in asteroid fields far from normal shipping lanes. However, the Council's surveillance technology, designed to monitor conventional civilizations, struggled to penetrate the surprisingly sophisticated stealth measures. The humans had suddenly developed. Admiral Korthver of the Zolonian Defense Fleet, a battle-scarred veteran of the last Spiral War, found himself increasingly uneasy with the situation. Unlike his civilian counterparts on the Council, he had spent centuries studying warfare across multiple species, and something about humanity's response troubled him deeply. High Counselor, Admiral Korthver addressed the emergency session, his forearms gesturing emphatically. I must advise caution in our approach to the human situation. My analysis of their historical military conflicts reveals patterns that concern me greatly. Zethkri's patterns shifted to dismissive. Yellow Admiral, surely you're not suggesting that these primitives pose any real threat? Their most advanced warships barely qualify as system patrol craft by our standards. That's precisely what concerns me. Counselor, humans have a documented history of defeating technologically superior opponents through unconventional tactics. They call it asymmetric warfare, and they've refined it over millennia of conflict among themselves. When faced with impossible odds, they don't surrender, they adapt. The ethereal representative pulsed with amusement. Admiral, you give them far too much credit. What could they possibly do to threaten civilizations that have mastered faster than light travel, quantum manipulation, and stellar engineering? Admiral Korthver's expression grew grim. That, honored delegate, is exactly what I'm afraid we're about to find out. As if summoned by his words, alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the Council station. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in pulsing red as automated systems announced incoming priority transmissions from across the galaxy. High Counselor Zethkri frantically activated the communication array, and the chamber's central hologram exploded with dozens of panicked reports from Council worlds. Nightmare had begun. First reports seemed almost trivial. On Proxima B, home to the energy-based ethereals, several solar collection arrays had mysteriously malfunctioned on the crystalline world of Vexstar. Mining operations had ground to a halt when their automated systems began producing incorrect calculations on the gas-giant refineries of the hegemony. Atmospheric processors had started extracting the wrong compounds, rendering months of work useless. But as more reports flooded in, a terrifying pattern emerged across the galaxy. On every major Council world, critical infrastructure was failing simultaneously, not from obvious attacks or visible damage, but from subtle sabotage so sophisticated that it appeared to be simple technical malfunction. Counselor Zethkri's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to deep purple, the color of fear among his species. How is this possible? He demanded. Our security systems show no signs of intrusion, no evidence of hostile action. Admiral Korthver studied the incoming data with growing horror. Because they're not attacking our security systems, Counselor, they're attacking something far more fundamental. He highlighted a section of his analysis. Every one of these malfunctions is occurring in infrastructure that was built using standardized Galactic Council construction protocols that have been publicly available for over 1,000 years. The implication hit the chamber like a physical blow. For a millennium, the Council had shared construction standards, communication frequencies, and technical specifications across all member civilizations in the name of interoperability and efficiency. It had never occurred to anyone that this openness could be weaponized. You're suggesting, the Vexthari delegates' mandibles clicked nervously, that the humans have somehow infiltrated our networks using our own protocols. Worse than that, Admiral Korthver replied grimly, I believe they've been doing it for months. Maybe years. Every malfunction is perfectly timed, perfectly targeted to cause maximum disruption without triggering our security systems. This isn't random sabotage, this is surgical warfare on a galactic scale. As if to punctuate his words, a new transmission appeared in the chamber's hologram. President Martinez sat in the same austere room, but now her expression held the satisfaction of a chess master announcing checkmate. Greetings, Galactic Council. She began with mock pleasantry. I trust you're beginning to understand the situation. What you're experiencing is just a small demonstration of humanity's capabilities. We've had months to study your systems, your protocols, your weaknesses, every public database you've maintained, every technical manual you've shared, every communication frequency you've standardized. We've turned them all into weapons. High Counselor Zethkri could barely form words through his shock. Impossible. Our security measures were designed to keep out conventional attacks. President Martinez interrupted, but we didn't attack your security systems. We simply used your own infrastructure against you. Your standardized construction protocols allowed us to predict exactly how your facilities would respond to certain inputs. Your shared communication networks gave us backdoors into every major system. Your 1,000-year-old tradition of technological openness became our roadmap for total warfare. The chamber fell silent except for the continuing alerts from compromised systems across the galaxy. The magnitude of what the humans had accomplished was staggering. They had effectively held 500 civilizations hostage using nothing but patience, intelligence, and the Council's own interconnected infrastructure. Martinez wasn't finished. With the casual gesture of someone adjusting a light switch, she activated a device off-screen across the galaxy. The subtle malfunctions that had been plaguing Council worlds suddenly intensified dramatically in the ocean world of Aquatica Prime. The massive tidal generators that powered the entire planet's civilization began operating in reverse, threatening to drain the planetary power grid within hours. On the desert world of Zarian, atmospheric processors started pumping out toxic compounds instead of breathable air, forcing billions of inhabitants into emergency shelters in the asteroid mining fields of the outer hegemony. Automated harvesters began consuming the very stations they were meant to supply, turning essential infrastructure into raw materials. But, perhaps most terrifying of all, was what happened to the Council's military assets across 50 star systems. The mighty warships of various species found their weapons systems locked in safe mode, their engines operating at minimum power, and their communication arrays broadcasting nothing but static. In a single moment, the humans had neutered the most powerful military force in galactic history without firing a single shot. Admiral Korthver stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. His own flagship, the pride of the Zolonian fleet, was reporting that its main cannons were somehow recalibrating themselves to fire confetti instead of plasma bolts. This is impossible, he whispered. Our military systems are completely isolated from civilian networks. President Martinez's image smiled coldly. Admiral, you've been thinking like a traditional military strategist. Isolated systems are only as secure as the people who maintain them. Did you know that 73% of your maintenance crews across the galaxy graduated from technical schools that use standardized Galactic Council educational materials that we've had access to for years? The horrifying truth began to dawn on the assembled delegates. The humans hadn't just infiltrated their computer systems, they had infiltrated their knowledge base, their educational foundations, their very way of thinking about technology. Over years of patient observation, they had identified and exploited fundamental assumptions that every Council species took for granted. Your maintenance crews have been unknowingly implementing our modifications for months. President Martinez continued. Every routine software update, Every standard parts replacement, every protocol adjustment has been moving your systems closer to our control. We didn't hack your networks, we convinced your own people to build backdoors for us, without them ever realizing what they were doing. High Counselor Zethkri's patterns had shifted to a sickly white, the color of complete shock among his species. What do you want from us? What we've always wanted, Counselor, to be left alone, you see. While you were busy feeling superior to the primitive humans, we were studying you. Every species in the Council follows predictable patterns based on your evolutionary history. You've all become so dependent on centralized systems, standardized protocols, and interconnected networks that you've forgotten how to function independently. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Humans, on the other hand, evolved from persistence hunters and tribal survivors. We're used to operating in small, independent groups with minimal resources. We're comfortable with chaos, adaptation, and making do with whatever's available. What you see as primitive stubbornness, we call resilience. The next phase of humanity's demonstration was perhaps the most psychologically devastating. President Martinez activated another control, and suddenly, every affected system across the galaxy returned to normal operation. Tidal generators resumed their proper function. Atmospheric processors began producing clean air again, and military vessels found their weapons systems back online for exactly 60 seconds. Then the chaos resumed. Worse than before, the message was crystal clear. Humanity could turn the galaxy's infrastructure on and off like a light switch, and there was nothing the Council could do to stop them. This is just a demonstration, President Martinez explained calmly. We could crash your economies, poison your atmospheres, disable your defenses, or simply turn off the lights across 500 worlds, all without ever leaving our home system, and all using your own technology against you. The ethereal representative pulsed with desperate light patterns. What are your terms? What do you want to stop this madness? Our terms are simple, President Martinez replied. First, immediate recognition of humanity's right to colonize any uninhabited system we choose, without Council interference. Second, a formal apology from this body for your arrogant assumption that you could dictate terms to a sovereign species. Third, the establishment of humanity as a permanent member of this Council with full voting rights. High Counselor Zethkri's patterns flickered between outrage and resignation. And if we refuse? President Martinez's smile became predatory again. Then we'll show you what happens when 8 billion humans stop playing nice. What you've seen so far has been the equivalent of us gently tapping you on the shoulder to get your attention. If you force us to escalate, we'll demonstrate why our species survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, and countless wars among ourselves. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. You've made the mistake of thinking that because we're younger and smaller, we're also weaker, but you've never faced a species that treats survival as a competitive sport. You've never encountered beings who consider impossible odds to be just another Tuesday. You've been living in a civilized galaxy for so long that you've forgotten what real predators look like. The chamber fell into complete silence. Even the translation fields seemed to struggle with the raw intensity of her words. We don't want to rule your galaxy, Council members. We don't want to destroy your civilizations. We just want to be left alone to grow and explore in peace. But if you insist on treating us like children who need your guidance, we'll show you exactly why humanity earned its place among the stars through blood, sacrifice, and an absolute refusal to surrender. The vote was unanimous, though it took 3 hours for some delegates to stop trembling long enough to cast their ballots. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all the rights and privileges thereof. Their colonies were officially recognized, and a formal apology was entered into the galactic record. But the real change went far deeper than mere political recognition. In the weeks that followed, every major civilization began quietly reviewing their infrastructure, their security protocols, their basic assumptions about technology and warfare. The humans had revealed vulnerabilities that no one had even known existed, and the implications were staggering. Admiral Korthver requested a private meeting with the human delegation, which was now permanently stationed on Council Prime, he found Dr. Sarah Chen, the mission's chief scientist, reviewing technical specifications in her modest office. Dr. Chen, he began carefully, I must ask, how long were you planning this operation? She looked up from her datapad with a slight smile. Admiral, we've been planning this since the moment we received your first friendly contact 40 years ago. The message was polite enough, but the subtext was clear. Stay in your corner of the galaxy and let the adults handle things that didn't sit well with us. 40 years of preparation. Admiral Korthver mused. Your entire species coordinated this deception for 4 decades. Oh, Admiral, Dr. Chen laughed. You still don't understand. This wasn't a deception. This was just us being human. We've been analyzing, planning, and preparing for every possible scenario since we first looked up at the stars. It's what we do when you're a species that evolved from prey animals who learned to hunt the hunters. You develop certain habits. She gestured to her datapad, which showed complex analyses of council infrastructure. Every human colony you thought was just agricultural or mining was also a research station, quietly analyzing council technology and looking for patterns. Every diplomatic exchange was intelligence gathering. Every trade agreement was an opportunity to study your systems from the inside. Admiral Korthver's forearms trembled slightly, and if we had simply welcomed you as equals from the beginning, then none of this would have been necessary. Dr. Chen replied simply, we're actually quite cooperative when we're treated with respect, but when someone tries to bully us, she shrugged. Well, you've seen what happens. The Admiral left her office with a new understanding of why humanity had survived and thrived in a universe that had tried repeatedly to destroy them. They weren't just survivors, they were adaptation incarnate, a species that turned every challenge into an opportunity and every enemy into a teacher. 6 months later, the Galactic Council had been fundamentally transformed. The humans hadn't just joined the existing power structure, they had forced everyone to reconsider how that structure worked. Committee meetings that had once been ceremonial affairs now involved serious debate, as delegates realized that their decisions might be scrutinized by beings who could turn their own technology against them. More importantly, humanity's demonstration had shattered the illusion of council invincibility. 3 lesser species that had been denied membership for centuries suddenly found their applications reconsidered. The message was clear. If you could prove you belonged among the stars, the council would listen. President Martinez, now serving as Earth's permanent representative, addressed the council during a routine session. Her presence alone was enough to ensure that proceedings remained civil and productive. No one wanted to risk provoking another demonstration. Honorable delegates, she began, I've been asked to address the concerns some of you have raised about humanity's unconventional approach to diplomacy. Some of you fear that we've introduced chaos into your ordered galaxy. High Counselor Zethkri, whose patterns had never quite returned to their normal brightness since the crisis, shifted nervously in his seat. I want to assure you that chaos was never our goal. President Martinez continued, but neither was submission. You see, where we come from, respect isn't given freely, it's earned for too long. This council operated on the assumption that age equals wisdom, that size equals strength, that tradition equals truth. She paused, looking around the chamber at delegates who now hung on her every word. We've shown you that a small, young species can reshape the galaxy through intelligence, determination, and the willingness to think differently, but we've also shown you that we prefer cooperation to conquest. The Vexthari delegate, who had been among the most dismissive of humanity during their first encounter, clicked his mandibles cautiously. Representative Martinez, what assurance do we have that humanity won't use these capabilities against law-abiding council members? President Martinez smiled, not the predatory expression she had worn during the crisis, but something warmer and more genuine. Delegate Vextha, you have the same assurance you've always had from any council member. Our word, backed by mutual benefit and shared prosperity. The difference is that now you know the cost of breaking that trust. But, she added, her voice taking on a harder edge, I want to be absolutely clear about something. Humanity will never again tolerate being treated as inferior or primitive We've proven our capabilities, we've earned our seat at this table, and anyone who tries to put us back in our place will discover that our demonstration 6 months ago was just us being polite." The chamber remained silent. But it was no longer the silence of shock, it was the silence of understanding. Humanity had announced their arrival on the galactic stage not with conquest or destruction, but with a masterpiece of strategic thinking that had left 500 civilizations reevaluating everything they thought they knew about power, technology, and survival. Years later, historians across the galaxy would mark humanity's integration into the Galactic Council. At the beginning of the Second Great Age of Expansion, the humans' example had inspired countless other species to push boundaries, challenge assumptions, and refuse to accept limitations imposed by others. Galaxy was becoming a more chaotic place, but also a more dynamic one. Innovation flourished as species competed to develop technologies that couldn't be turned against them by clever adversaries. Diplomatic protocols evolved to account for beings who might smile politely while plotting your civilization's downfall. Military strategists studied human history with the same intensity that their predecessors had once devoted to ancient battle tactics. Admiral Korthfer, now commanding the new Interspecies Defense Initiative, a joint project inspired by humanity's demonstration of galactic vulnerability, often reflected on the lessons learned during those terrifying months. His forces now trained regularly with human advisors, learning to think like predators rather than prey, to adapt rather than rely on overwhelming force. The humans taught us something vital, he explained to his officer corps during a strategy briefing. They showed us that, in the vast, dark galaxy, survival doesn't belong to the biggest or the strongest or even the most advanced. It belongs to those who refuse to give up, who turn every disadvantage into an opportunity, and who remember that evolution rewards the adaptable, not the comfortable. On Earth, President Martinez had returned to private life, but her legacy lived on in the motto that now adorned every human vessel that ventured into the stars. Per aspera ad astra, through hardships to the stars. It was a reminder that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers, but their absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were the most dangerously persistent in a universe full of ancient civilizations that had grown comfortable with their place in the cosmic order. Humans remained hungry, curious, and utterly unwilling to be told what they couldn't. Don't. In the end, that made all the difference.